Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. I'm excited to return to Edgar Cayce. I wanted to do an analysis of some of Edgar Cayce's readings and channelings to learn more about the Akashic Record. Edgar Cayce may have been one of the first main proponents publicly about the Akashic Record. Popularly known as the Sleeping Prophet, Cayce would go into deep slumber or sleep and would then channel information from the Akashic Record. Cayce, born in 1877 and died in 1945, has been called the Sleeping Prophet, the father of holistic medicine, the miracle man of Virginia Beach, and the most documented psychic of all time. For 43 years of his adult life, he had the ability to put himself into some kind of self-induced sleep state by lying down on a couch, closing his eyes, and folding his hands over his stomach. The state of relaxation and meditation enabled him to place his mind in contact with all time and space and gave him the ability to respond to any question he was asked. We can get some information from the Cayce material as to how to access the Akashic and what it is and how it works. He mentions it in many sessions, and I think that you'll find this incredibly interesting if you're interested in the Akashic Record. If you get a chance, check out my meditation, Akashic Jumping, which allows you to go into the Akashic Record and explore in a certain kind of way. Imagine having a computer system that kept track of every event, thought, image, or desire that had ever transpired on the earth. Imagine as well that rather than simply a compilation of written data and words, this system contained countless videotape films and pictures, providing the viewer with an eyewitness account of all that had ever happened within any historical time frame. Imagine as well that this enormous database kept track not only of the information from an objective perspective, but also maintained the perspectives and emotions of every individual involved. Finally, imagine that this source contained not only information from the past and present, but also constantly calculated probable futures based on current events. As incredible as all of this may sound, this description gives a fairly accurate representation of the Akashic Records. Cayce, who has been called the most documented psychic of all time, as well as a 20th century mystic, helped thousands of people through the use of his remarkable intuitive ability. For over 40 years, Cayce gave readings or psychic dissertations using the Akashic Records as his primary source of information. Cayce's essential talent was his ability to access and describe information from these records. Information that would enable people to discover everything from their essential purpose in life and their talents and abilities to the root cause of a relationship issue or any challenge that they needed to overcome. It was a source of information, Cayce claimed, which was available to everyone. In an effort to describe how this was feasible, Edgar Cayce stated that it was not only possible for individuals to attune to the Akashic Records, but that it was something that occurred frequently. Although the records were not physical in nature, an individual in attunement could hear, read, and experience the information nonetheless. In order to illustrate what an individual might perceive while viewing this information, Cayce told an 18-year-old girl that the Akashic Records of the mental world was comparable to a movie theater of the physical world. This movie could be replayed in an effort to understand what had occurred in an individual's experience in any period, at any time, or while in any place in history. Also within this data was a record of lessons learned, opportunities lost, faults acquired, and experiences gained. In terms of the past, the Akashic Records of the past are associated with soul memory. In fact, Cayce suggested that karma was nothing more than memory. Just as a married couple may have very different memories about a past event that they shared, each of us deals only with our own karmic memory. There really is not karma between people. Instead, there is a karma with one's own self. The conceptual challenge, however, is that individuals seem to come to terms most effectively with their own karmic memory or meet themselves through their interactions with others. It is this interesting dynamic of meeting oneself through relationships with others that often causes individuals to perceive them as the basis of one's frustrations and challenges rather than accepting personal responsibility. And yet, in spite of the fact that karma belongs to oneself, each soul is constantly drawn toward certain individuals and groups that will enable that individual to meet self in probable circumstances and relationships. Those individuals and groups are in turn drawn towards specific people in an effort to come to terms with their own karmic memory. In terms of how memory from past lives can affect us in the present, there are many interesting examples in the Cayce files, including one that deals with John Jay, a figure from American history. As background information, John Jay was one of the leading political figures during the American Revolution. He sought stability in the new nation and favored continued close ties with Britain. He served the U.S. as a diplomat to both Spain and France. One of the authors of the Federalist Papers, he favored a strong national government sympathetic to industry and commerce. Washington appointed from the first justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. In time, he resigned from the Supreme Court and served as governor of New York. During the Continental Congress, Jay was apparently in a tavern and noticed a beautiful young woman who was working as a waitress. He commented to Colonel Morris, his companion, that she was one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen. He stated that her beauty was partially due to the fact that her face was the color of inside of a conch shell. Apparently, the two men retold the story repeatedly at the Continental Congress. They had met the most beautiful woman in the world, but they were not going to tell anyone where she worked. The story became known as the Conch Shell Beauty and was so well known that it was retold in a biography about John Jay, Defender of Liberty by Frank Monahan, 1935. Prior to the publication of that book, a 4-year-old boy was walking along a Florida beach with his nanny and stopped to pick up a shell. He asked her what it was, and she replied, "That's a conch shell." The little boy looked confused, and an unusual idea entered his head, and he asked her, "Can a person's face be the color of a conch shell?" 2 years later, that little boy had a reading and was told that he had been John Jay. That is karmic memory. While giving a reading to a 28-year-old freight agent, Cayce tried to define these records further. Not only did he discuss what the Akashic records were, but he explained how they were written and clarified how an individual could gain access to the information. Apparently, any type of endeavor, whether action, thought, desire, or deed, creates some kind of activity of vibration. This vibration produces a mark upon what Cayce called the skein of space and time, and is somehow permanently identified with individuals responsible. Although unseen, it is an etheric energy that is evident to a sensitive as the printed word is to a sighted person. Since these records are so complete, so accurate, and so individualized, a logical question might be, just what is the purpose of the Akashic records in the first place? Simply put, the answer has to do with keeping track of assisting with each soul's personal growth and transformation. Interestingly enough, the Bible refers to these Akashic records as the Book of Life, and suggests that the deeds of the soul are essentially judged by that which is written in the Book of Life. The Edgar Cayce readings describe how each of us writes the stories of our lives through our thoughts, our deeds, and our interactions with other people. Our karmic memory of others does not destine the outcome of any relationship. Instead, it provides an energetic impact upon our subconscious thought processes. In other words, we have to deal with our own subconscious feelings in our encounters with other people, even when those feelings do not necessarily have their roots in the present. Everyone has encountered this dynamic. Even though he or she may not be aware of it, it is easy to become conscious of these experiences because they essentially entail emotional responses to a situation, positive or negative, that are more emotionally charged or more heightened than the situation itself. Essentially, Edgar Cayce's cosmology of the entire universe can be summed up as follows. God is essentially love, and the universe is completely orderly. Beyond that concept is the premise that each individual was purposely created as a soul, to become a companion with the Creator. Life did not begin at the moment of physical birth, rather, there was an existence in spirit prior to physicality. God gave to each soul complete freedom of choice and the opportunity to find expression, to find self, so to speak. Because souls were created in God's image, it would be only through a process of personal experiences, one choice leading to another, and then another, and then another, that God's companions could gain their own individuality, truly being a part of Him, and yet individuals in their own right. Once they had discovered their individuality, they would once again return in consciousness to be His companion and co-creator. According to the readings, the soul basically is creative in nature, longs to find self-expression. In fact, the essential question repeatedly posed by the soul might be, who am I? This question is addressed in infinite ways as each soul chooses specific experiences to meet itself. The soul gains first-hand knowledge not only about its own identity, but also learns how choices may lead to certain experiences. In time, soul experiences and acquired knowledge will lead to wisdom. Inevitably, wisdom will lead to compassion, and eventually, love will be the end result. At this point, the soul will know its individual identity as well as its true relationship with God. The soul will have come to understand that it is primary essence and God's are one and the same, love. For its own part, the soul finds itself in a physical body in an attempt to experience the dynamics of cause and effect, eventually learning to manifest perfect love, and in time becoming a fit companion for the Creator. The Akashic Records are essentially our personal tool for keeping track of the lessons we have learned and still need to master on the soul's wholeness curriculum. Ultimately, where is all of this leading? Why are we supposed to be working on loving one another and dealing with issues we have with one another? The answer is so that we can become worthy companions of an all-loving Creator. The soul is destined to grow and eventually awaken to an awareness of its true relationship to God. Whatever it takes to bring about this growth in consciousness is exactly what the Akashic Records will continually draw toward the soul. Cayce asked one individual, how much longer can the will of man continue to defy its maker? In my interview with Jim McCarty, the scribe for the Law of One Material, when we were discussing the new Earth or the transition to the fourth density or fifth dimension, he explained, according to the Law of One Material, it is when the Akashic Records become conscious. This is a very unusual idea to consider and think about. And I believe that it's so profound that it will change everything. It'll be more consequential than any technological creation that we've had. More important than TV or the iPhone or whatever it is. When we have the ability to access the Akashic mutually together, and it becomes a living thing that knows about us and wants to help us, and we're able to interact with it, it will change everything. It will change the way that we interact with people and the way our planet is in general. There are a number of readings that Cayce gave about the Akashic Records, and we're going to read some of those. In 1933, Cayce lectured in Norfolk, Virginia on the continuity of life, relating the following dream, which he had experienced many times since the early 20s when giving a life reading. I see myself as a tiny dot out of my physical body. which lies inert before me. I find myself oppressed by darkness, and there is a feeling of terrific loneliness. Suddenly I am conscious of a white beam of light. As this tiny dot, I move upward, following the light, knowing that I must follow it or be lost. As I move along this path of light, I gradually become conscious of various levels upon which there is movement. Upon the first levels, there are vague, horrible shapes, grotesque forms such as one sees in nightmares. Passing on, there begins to appear on either side misshapen forms of human beings with some part of the body magnified. Again, there is change, and it becomes conscious of gray hooded forms moving downward. Gradually, these become lighter in color. Then the direction changes and these forms move upward, and the color of the robes grows rapidly lighter. Next, there begins to appear on either side vague outlines of houses, walls, trees, etc., but everything is motionless. As I pass on, there is more light and movement in what appear to be normal cities and towns. With the growth of movement, I become conscious of sounds, at first indistinct rumblings, then music, laughter, and singing of birds. There is more and more light, the colors become very beautiful, and there is the sound of wonderful music. The houses are left behind. Ahead, there is only a blending of sound and color. Quite suddenly, I came upon a hall of records. It is a hall without walls, without ceiling, but I am conscious of seeing an old man who hands me a large book, a record of the individual for whom I have set to seek information. In another reading, Cayce says, upon time and space is written the thoughts, the deeds, the activities of an entity, as in relationships to its environs, its hereditary influences as directed, or judgment drawn by or according to what the entity's ideal is. Hence, as it has been oft called, the record is God's book of remembrance, and each entity, each soul, as the activities of a single day of an entity in the material world, either makes some good or bad or indifferent, depending upon the entity's application of self towards that which is the ideal manner for the use of time, opportunity, and expression of that for which each soul enters a material manifestation. The interpretation then, as drawn here, is with the desire and hope that in opening this for the entity, the experience may be one of hopefulness and helpfulness. Thus, in seeing self as it really is before the self, before the throne, before the universal consciousness, it is the hope that this will bring a better understanding as to what the purpose of an experience are in the material plane, with the daily activities and urges that arise from material circumstance, mental attitudes, and the work to be accomplished of whatever nature this may be. Hence we find from the records the astrological aspects or sojourns of the entity or soul between the earthly manifestations indicate that which has been part of the entity's experience. For as the tree falls, so it may lie. In another reading, Cayce's wife states, "You will have before you the body and inquiring mind of 416. They would replace the names with numbers. Present in this room, also the information which has been given him through this channel upon which he seeks expansion, clarification, and further information, advice, and guidance as to how he may make practical application of such in his present life. After giving such a reading, you will then answer the question he submits as I ask them." Cayce says, yes, we have the body, the inquiring mind, 416, present in this room, and the information that has been given respecting this body and the soul activity in the varied environs that influence the body in its present experience. Then, in aiding the body to make practical application of that which has been or may be given in information of such a nature, or through such a channel, it would be well that the body understand as to how and from what source such information may come, that there may be seen as to how practical that which may be given may be made in the self's own experience in this particular period. When there is the thought or the activity of the body in any particular environ, this very activity makes for the impression upon the soul. For the soul is that body which lives on into infinity, and is the companion of the particular body only in a particular or individual experience. As to the records made by such an activity, these are written upon what is known as time or space, much in the form or manner as are the messages that are of a familiar nature to the body in its present activity. As the instruments of recording are used, so does the activity of energy expended leave its imprint upon the etheric wave that records between time and space that desire to be put, as to the impelling or producing, just as the figures or the characters make for communications between individuals, so does the soul upon the pages or records of time and space. Then this body, through whom the information comes, being in accord or attune by the subjugation of consciousness into materiality, becomes the channel through which such records may be read. The interpretation of the record then depends upon how good a reader the body is, or how well in accord with the varied experiences through which the entity seeking has passed, or the records that have been made by that soul. Hence, there may be much more of a detailed record read of an experience through which both souls passed than of environs that were not a portion of that soul so interpreting the activities. But each soul, as this, has made a definite record just as clear as that which may be written with ink and pen, or with any other type, style, or form of transmitting or recording that activity of an individual soul. Then in using that which has been given respecting this soul's activity in the earth, that there may be greater influence in the experience in the present, it is just the same activity as the training of the mind into those fields of activity that may be used by the entity or soul or body in its relations and dealings with others. In another reading, he says, as we find the record is builded by an entity in the Akashian record is to mental world as the cinema is to the material or physical world as pictured in its activity. So in the direction to an entity and its entrance into the material plane in a given period, time, place, which indicate the relative position of the entity as related to the universe or to the universal sources, then one only turns, as it were, to those records in the Akashian forms to read that period of that built or that lost during that experience. In another reading, Cayce says, yes, we have the entity and those relations with the universe and universal forces that are latent and manifested in the personalities of the entity now known or called 757. As recorded by the experiences in the soul's activity and journey through the environs that make for those impressions, or those that become manifested influences or forces in the experience of an entity in its present sojourn in the earth. Questions naturally arise in this particular experience of this entity as to how or in what manner the records are made of an entity's sojourn or activity in sphere or space, so that there are the abilities of one to read or interpret. Same. Are they as letters written? Are they as pictures of the experiences of an entity? Are they in forms as of omens or characters that represent certain influences or activities about the earth? Yes, all of these, my friend, and more, for they as but the skein of life itself, the expression of a divine force from God the Father itself, making manifestations in forms that become manifestations in a material experience. For truly, to be absent from the body is to be present with those infinite influences and forces that may act upon and be acted upon, from the emanations of divine influences that may be either visions as pictured, written as thought in characterization, from the various influences through which such entities make for the communication, whether in ideas or in characters that represent those ideas in their expressions as one to another, as in all forms of communicative influences from one entity or soul to another. In a look in an expression of some portion of the anatomical influences or form, or from word or from turn as they cut or form of eye, shape or form of mouth, the rising of the brow, or in any communicative influences, these either bespeak of those things that are for the aggrandizement of self's own motives or impulses, or are the expression of that purpose, that desire, whereunto such a soul or expression or entity has been called. These are the forms or manners through which such are written, as in the book of life, and may be read and known of men. For that which is done in secret is proclaimed from the housetop. In another reading, they asked the question, what is the significance of the experience had during reading 373, Wednesday afternoon, July 12th, in which Edgar Cayce saw himself traveling through water in a bubble and arriving at the place where he always gets the information, the old man with the books? Cayce answers, to bring from one realm to another those experiences through which an entity, a soul, may pass in obtaining these reflections that are necessary for transmission of the information sought, it becomes necessary for the understanding of those in that realm seeking to have that which is to the mental being put in the language of that being as near as it is possible, to do justice to the subject. In this particular instance, then, to reach that record suggested by the suggestion itself, as of coming into existence across waters, the very thought of those present, that it becomes necessary that that which is to receive or transmit the information must seek, as indicated by the manner in which periods, ages, dates, years, days are turned back in arriving at the experience of the entity in a charged environ, meant that the psychic influences in their activity with or through the physical forces of the body must in some manner pass through the necessary elements for arriving at or reaching the beginning of that point, with the amount of water that is more often thought than of ether. What more befitting than that in the bubble the seeking forces should guide themselves? Then so becomes much that arrives in the material plane in the form of pictures or expressions, that there may be the conveying to the mind of the seeker something in his own type of experience, as to how the transmission of the activity takes place. Of what forces? The psychic or soul forces that are akin to what? The creative forces, or that called God. So the body in a symbolized form as the bubble arrives at a place in which there is kept the records of all, as signified in the speaking of the book of life, or to indicate or symbolize that each entity, each soul in its growth may find its way back to the creative influences that promised in and through him that gives and is life, and finds this as a separate, definite, integral part of the very soul, hence symbolized as being in books, and the man, the keeper, as the keeper of the records, much in the manner as would be said the Lord of the storm, of the sea, of the lightning, of the light, of the day, of love, of hope, of faith, of charity, of long-suffering, of brotherly love, of kindness, of meekness, of humbleness, of self. So in the materialization for the concept of these that seek to know, to be enlightened, to the world long has there been sought that, as in books, to many the question naturally arises, then, are there literally books? To a mind that thinks books, literally books, as it would be for the mind that in its passage from the material plane into rest would require Elysian fields with birds, with flowers. It must find the materialized form of that portion of the Maker in that realm wherein the entity, that soul, would enjoy such in that sphere of activity. As houses built in wood, wood in its essence as given is what? Books in their essence are what? What is the more real, the book with its printed pages, its gilt edges, or the essence of the told in the book, which is the more real, the love manifested in the Son, the Savior, for his brethren, or the essence of love, that there may be seen even in the vilest of passion? They are one, but they bring into being in a materialized form is what elements of the one source have been combined to produce a materialization. It's beautiful, isn't it? How far then is ungodliness from godliness? Just under, that's all. Seek then ye in understanding as to where, from what source, there may be gained the experiences of an entity, a soul, through its journeys in this odic sphere, or through that known as this solar system. Each portion of that one whole in that we call life, as it uses the attributes of the physical force of a created form manifested in a material world, makes a record as truly as is seen in the cylinder of the plate of the phonograph, or as is given to the radio transmitter upon the ethers of a material world. Going out where? Only those become conscious of the same that have attuned themselves to that which is in accord or seeking to know. Then his will for each soul, every soul, should seek to attune its mind, its soul, yea, its body vibrations to that the Son of Man, the Mother God in Jesus Christ, living in the earth, tuned into the light, and it becomes beautiful in that you think that you are, that you live. In another question they ask, please explain the experience the next morning, August 30th, while giving 257 business readings in which he was going through and surrounded by blackness. Cayce says a razor is a wonderful instrument for shaving beards. It will trim pencils, but not many beards after it is used very long. A pearl is an adornment, a thing of beauty created through the irritation of that which manifests itself in a lowly way to those that consider themselves of high estate. But by the very act of irritation to its own vibration is the higher vibration created, or brings about the pearl of great price. Yet it does not look well in the sow's ear. In the use then through which the soul of the body would pass to seek that as may be sought by the varied creations of man's activity in a material life, to what depths must such a soul oft descend to bring back that may even lend an air of help to a hungry soul. Through such irritation, though oft does the soul grow even as the pearl, so long as that manifested then by the life in a manifested form keeps pure, little harm may come, but once lost can never be regained, even as that given into the heart of every mother to carry to her chosen one the bloom of life itself only once. So in the understanding of that as happens when through the shadows of the slime, through the darkness, or through the grime, may the soul seek to bring light that which will ease the burden of a hungry soul. It finds its hardship, yes, here and there, yet may lead the soul to the heavenly stair. In another question, submitted by Reverend Thos D. Wesley, Presbyterian minister, what, where, or how is the direct and immediate point of contact where the personal God and the soul of which contact the soul is conscious and certain? Cayce answers, as the sons and daughters of God are personal, are individual with their many attributes that are characteristics, personalities, or individualities, so this then is a shadow from that from which is sprang its maker. Must be the maker be individualized with its attributes and its personalities, and yet fill all of life as becomes manifested in the spiritual realm, the realm of the soul, or the temporal house, the abode of the soul for a day, as the soul seeks then for that which is the sustenance of the body. As what the food is to a developing, growing body, so are the words of truth, which are life, which are love, which are God, sought that make for growth, even as the digesting of the material things in a body make for a growth. This growth may not be felt in the consciousness of materialization. It is experienced by the consciousness of the soul, by which it enables the soul to use the attributes of the soul's food, even as the growth of the body makes for the use of muscular forces of attributes of the physical body. Where is the contact? As ye seek him, so it is like beget like, for ye are co-laborers with him, if ye have put on the whole of his love in thine own life. Feed then upon the fruits of the Spirit, love, hope, joy, mercy, long-suffering, brotherly love, and the contact, the growth will be seen, and within the consciousness of the soul will the awareness come of the personality of the God in thee. In another reading, he says, "Oft may it occur to one seeking such understandings that may be gained through such channels, as to how such records of experiences are made, and as to how or why it becomes possible for only one here and there to interpret or read such records, and how that in the varied interpretations there may at times occur what appears to be a great discrepancy in the amount of character of such interpretations. As the entity in its present activities is in that field which requires the consideration of pigment or combination of elements that act or react under the varied conditions, especially those in which light, heat, and other vibrations have much to do, and as the experiences through the period of being sought concerning were much as would be learned in the present, the basis for that followed in the line of activity today, such questions are of particular interest. Then, to draw a comparison that some concept may be gained as to the nature of records and how they are recorded, and the manner in which interpretations are made, and the variations that occur. Let's then for that moment put this in the language of that in which the entity is engaged. This aside, don't think that you present will know very much more than you did before. When a die is cast, there are basic influences that form that from which to which other things are added to take from or add to produce an effect that will not be acted upon by light, heat, moisture, or the like, or other elements with the same. Yet, in addition to subtract from this first basis, there is always left that record in that which exists in the present of the die, as to what basis the beginning was measured from, and in the interpretation, the analysis of what records were made as they were being put together, the interpreter loses sight of the base of the addition and sees the result rather than the activity producing the same. Just so in the soul life, the soul's contact with that which is conscious, that partakes of or presents or is represented in material form. The reading or interpretation of such an Akashic record or cosmic impression or such influence depends upon the ability of the interpreter to meet in the same force or attune into the same vibration as to be able to translate or interpret the same. In another reading, Cayce's wife asks, "You will have before you Norfolk Study Group number 1, members of which are present here and work on the present lesson, copy of which I hold in my hand. You will continue the discourse on the lesson of wisdom." Cayce says, "Yes, we have the group as gathered here, as a group, as individuals in their work upon the lessons of wisdom. Yet to whom the book of life, yea, the record of thine experience has been opened, there is the awareness that ye are indeed the children of God. And as children, in thy wisdom ye may approach boldly the throne of mercy, for the prayers of the righteous are heard, for they have attuned in wisdom to the God consciousness within, and have come to the realization that they are not alone, but that he walketh and he talketh with those which have called upon his name, and who day by day show forth in their conversation their love, for Jesus is the way, Jesus is the Christ, Jesus is the mediator, Jesus is wisdom to those who will hearken to do his bidding. And as he hath given, if ye love me, keep my commandments, for they are not grievous to bear, for I will bear them with thee. I will wipe away thy tears, I will comfort the brokenhearted. I will bring all to those in the ways that are in the wisdom of God, for thy expression through each experience in each activity of thine. For thy soul in its wisdom seeketh expression with him. Smother it not in the doubts and the fears of materiality, but in the spirit of love and truth that encompasseth all, and that is open to ye who have set thy hearts, thy faces toward the love that is in Jesus, thy friend, thy brother. These, my brethren, yea, these are my beloved children. Know that in him is the truth, the light. Ye have seen a great light, ye have touched upon the wisdom of the Father, as is shown in the Son. Then make the path straight. Let thy conversation, thy wishes, thy desires be rather as one with him, who thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Ye know the way. Do ye stumble in ignorance or in selfishness? Do ye doubt, for the gratifying of thy body or for the fulfilling of the body appetites? Ye know the way. Let them that love of the infinite fire thee to action, to doing, and indeed live as hath been shown. Study to show thyself in body, in mind, approved unto that thou hast chosen in the words of Jesus, thy master, thy brother, in dividing the words of life in such measures that all who know thee, yea, that contact thee, take cognizance of the fact that thou walkest and thou talkest with Jesus day by day, keeping thyself in body, in mind, unspotted from the world. This is the wisdom of God, and is thine if ye will but claim it as thy own. And may the grace and the mercy and the peace of a life lived in thine own consciousness be thine through him that is able to present our lives before the throne of God spotless, white as snow, washed in the blood of the sacrifices made in our own daily experiences, even as he has shown us the way. In another reading he says, remember all of these should be then in accord with that ye have attained to, that the book of life is given thee. What is the book of life? The record of God, thee, thy soul within the knowledge of the same. They ask about the book of life. He says it's the record of the individual entity itself, writes upon the skein of time and space, or skein of time and space through patience, and is opened when self has attuned to the infinite, and may be read by those attuning to that consciousness. In another channeling, he says, the records are upon time and space, which are manifestations of that influence or force we call God. We are both old and ever new, but only in patience does the finite mind become aware of the value of the same upon the finite, infinite, or spiritual self. Thus the records are taken from this skein of time and space. Hence, as an entity enters and leaves consciousness in materiality, there is left upon time and space that which has been the activity. Thus, there may be the interpreting of same. In another reading, they ask, explain from what sources this information may be obtained. Cayce says, conditions, thoughts, activities of men in every clime are things as thoughts are things. They make their impression upon the skein of time and space. Thus, as they make for their activity, they become as records that may be read by those in accord or attuned to such a condition. This may be illustrated in the wavelength of the radio or of such an activity. The activities, go upon the waves of light upon that of space, and those instruments that are attuned to the same may hear, may experience that which is being transmitted. Hence, do not in seeking confuse thyself, that there may not be variations as to the interpretations of an economic influence or forces that are being enacted in the thought and activity of varied groups. Just as ether programs may be sent from any given activity, the outer world is only an activity of the shadow world. In another channeling, he says, in giving the interpretation of these records, these are upon the skein of time and space, and that would realize, come to the consciousness that what we are in any given experience or time is the combined results of what we have done about the ideals that we have set. These are in keeping with creative or constructive influences, then these are developing periods. If they are of the selfish nature or with the lack of idealism or ideals, then there is the retardment or the lack of unfoldment. Indeed, the life and the experiences about every soul are such that if individuals will but take the lessons, the understandings of nature as it manifests in influences about self, they will see that such are the expression of the individual's self-unfoldment. As an illustration, a bulb is an expression of life, of beauty in its filling its place in whatever environment it finds itself. Man can change his environment by the thinking. The bulb cannot, but man may view the purpose of all nature. He may view the bulb and see himself. If the environment is that which tends to enliven, enriched by creative forces added as a constructive influence, then the beauty, the richness of the expression is a growth, but it is dwarfed by an influence which blinders. It does the best with what it has. So with man, the retrogression or progress is according to the application. The soul of each individual is a portion of the whole, with the birthright of the creative forces to become a co-creator with the Father, a co-laborer with him. As that birthright is then manifested, growth ensues. If it is made selfish, retardments must be the result. In another reading, they ask, we have the records that have been made for the entity now called 1402. In summing the records here from that which has been made, these are the book of remembrance. These are the books of life. Life is that influence that which is manifested in the materiality as expressing growth, love, hate, disappointments, sorrows, hopes, courage, faith, and those things that take hold upon the soul, that which is the everlasting. And this book is written upon the skein of what ye call time and space. These exist, each of these, only in the finite mind, as that which represents the separation of the various growths or experiences. So there's a bunch more information, and I recommend, if you get a chance, that you read the book, The Akashic Records, Blueprint for Your Soul by Edgar Cayce. And there is a much more elaborate collection of different channelings, and I may go back and read some more. He talks about planetary sojourns in consciousness, which we may dedicate an episode to, but this is a good summary and collection of what he says about the Akashic Record. He sort of explains it as if he goes in a bubble, and as I've also experienced and other people have said, you will experience the Akashic Record uniquely for yourself. The entity or the Akashic itself will want to communicate to you whatever is easiest for you to understand. If it's a movie, if it's a song, if it's a book, whatever it is, in your language, that will be what you receive. Everyone is a little bit different, and they have a variety of different ways of transmitting this information to you. Some people make it super complicated, as if you get certification or something to be able to communicate with the Akashic. I think that it's much more subtle than that. I do not think that it requires a specific ritual or ceremony. I believe that we're constantly in touch with the Akashic, and that we need to learn how to fine-tune our ability to understand these things. There is so many different readings that Cayce did on the influence of past lives on our lives, on destiny, on free will, that come from these explorations of the Akashic Records that are completely fascinating. But I want you to wrap the idea around yourself. What if everybody knew everything? What if everybody you met instantly had a complete record of your entire existence and all your lives? That's going to change our relationships pretty dramatically. Everybody has secrets. Everybody has skeletons in their closet. We all live in our shadows. And so as the Akashic awakens and people become able to access this, and then it becomes more than just a subconscious thing, it becomes conscious and regular, it's going to change the world. People are going to have to forgive. People are going to be aware of all of the terrible things that everybody's done, and people are going to have to forgive. Moving on the path of love is the key, and understanding that you are everyone else, seeing yourself in everyone else, it will be easy for you to forgive. And we're going to go through a reckoning if that's the case. It's very subtle and slow, because nothing ever happens super fast in nature. What we're experiencing now is a sort of empathy. It's a subconscious awareness of the Akashic. As everybody becomes more and more empathic, They become aware of the feelings and thoughts of others, but not right out in the open. We've gotten so used to what we think our conscious state should be that as we get this information, the conscious mind pushes it down into the body, regulates it, pushes it aside. So on a regular basis, you need to be open to getting this information. It is available to you and you can access it. It is written on the skein of time and space, as Cayce explains. There's a bunch of other information, but this is just a good sampling and discussion of the Akashic by Cayce. And so I recommend you read that book. And I'd love to get your personal experiences with the Akashic record. Have you explored the Akashic? How did you do it? How long did it take for you to connect? Was the information ever incorrect or misinterpreted? Did you have someone else help you to access these records? Please put in the comments if you know of any books or meditations or magical rituals that you have used that have made your access to the Akashic easier. Treat the comments like a laboratory. Put a like on this because everybody needs to know about the Akashic, and a good place to start is Edgar Cayce. I would love to get your impressions of this. I'm sending out thoughts of love and happiness and joy to everyone, as we are all co-creators, and it's a wonderful, beautiful thing that we are all entering in love as companions and co-creators with the great creator that is putting us and creating us and allowing us to experience this incredible universe. In any case, all episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.